still unable to go out, apart from occasionally. So this morning, I had it was a call, it was like a brainstorm call that I do for my subscribers to my email list. And it was about kind of it was called Future Proof Your Music. Hi, Ben. No worries, you can catch up on the replay later. You don't need to stay. It was a Future Proof Your Music call where I ran people through a little workshop exercise, and in the absolute chaos that's going on at the moment, I just seem to have about such a smaller amount of time than I did before this crisis hit. But anyway, in the chaos, it was my mistake utterly, but I didn't realise that we hadn't upgraded the size of the webinar beyond 100. And I didn't realise so many people would want to turn up. So unfortunately, some people couldn't get in. We reached 100 and it stayed at 100 people for like an entire hour before, and we did this whole workshop exercise about future-proofing their music. And a lot of people couldn't get in. So if you're watching this and you couldn't get into the brainstorm call this morning, or whenever the morning was, but the Future Proof Your Music call, and you were disappointed and you were frustrated, I'm extremely sorry about that. It was entirely my mistake. It was just an oversight. Didn't think about the size, and honestly wasn't expecting that many people to be on the call. And what you can do is you can send me an email to mike@makemusicyourlife.com, and I'll make sure I send you the recording and the workshop exercise so you don't miss out. Anyway, and what I will do in future is I will make sure that I upgrade my Zoom webinar size so that more people can join. Anyway, on to what I'm going to talk about today. Because the other thing that struck me was, I think on my live stream yesterday, I said I was going on today to do some music. And then I realized that wasn't actually the right day. I'm doing it tomorrow. So tomorrow at this time, I'm going to be working on a track that I started in the Idea Explosion Challenge program. And the day after, I'm going to be working on a track that I've been working on for a long time. So I'll be doing that at this time tomorrow and the day after. But for today, I just want to talk about something that kind of I focused on in the call, which is about optimism, being an optimist, and why would you do that in a situation like a sort of crisis situation? Isn't it, extremely Pollyanna-ish, sticking your head in the sand, saying everything's going to be great? The power of positive thinking. Isn't that what you're doing if you're being optimistic in a situation like that? What is there to be optimistic about? Nobody's got any gigs. Loads of people have lost their income, and these really are terrible things. Lost their income. There are people dying. We're in the midst of a crisis the like of which none of us have ever seen. And I think actually what I have realised and really kind of re-engaged with is the fact that optimism is the mindset that I am cultivating through this. And if you're kind of scratching your head right now, just bear with me a bit, because the reason you're scratching your head might be because we have a different definition of optimism. Because to me, optimism isn't about, sitting in a cupboard and saying, things are going to be great, things are going to be great, things are going to be great, and expecting them to happen, or just kind of sticking your head in the sand and just expecting everything to be fine. It's kind of the opposite. And how I want to explain this to you is with a little kind of model I've come up with, which explains different ways of processing the past and the future. So, if you think about you and how you actually, in a default sense, think, do you tend to think about, or is it mainly in your mind that you wish, and you can only choose one, right? Do you tend to wish for a return to a rosy past? Do you wish for a return to a rosy past? In other words, do you tend to be nostalgic about a wonderful past that doesn't exist now? Or are you turning away from a terrible past? Yeah, are you kind of running away from a terrible past? Is that what is holding you back? Okay, so if we think about kind of 4 quadrants, yeah, and we've got past and future on one axis, yeah, and then on the other axis we've got positive and negative. Okay, so on this side, the past side, we've got you're being held back by a positive past. In other words, you're being held back because you can't let go of how great things used to be. Yeah, I'll call you in that quadrant, you're nostalgic. Yeah. Down here, if you are being held back by a terrible past, things that you can't, you can't stand, you're going, well, I can't do this now because of all this stuff that happened to me in the past. Yeah, then I would describe that as bitter. Yeah. Then if we go on to the other side, into the future, yeah, if you are moving towards a terrible future, then let's say that is being a pessimist. Yeah, you're being pessimistic. Then on the other hand, on the future and positive side, you are looking to create or find or make a better future, then you are being optimistic. So which of those best describes your default state? Do you tend to be, and all of us, I think, kind of slip into these, sometimes I can be bitter about things, sometimes I can be nostalgic, sometimes I can be pessimistic, and sometimes I can be optimistic. But I think now my default way of thinking is optimism. Yeah, I'm always looking about how I can create a better future. That does not mean that the future that I am looking to make better, everything about it is going to be better. But in other words, what's happening is I am going with the cards that I'm dealt, playing the cards that I'm dealt, and trying to work with them, rather than being held back by a hand I no longer have, which is nostalgic and bitter, or being held back because I'm expecting nothing to work. Yeah. So if you are any of the other one, nostalgic, bitter, or pessimistic, and you would like to know how to be optimistic, stay tuned. Because, but before I tell you how I'm doing it, anyway, I'm not saying that this is the only way to do it, but this is how I'm thinking about it. But before I do that, I just want to let you know why it's a good idea. At the end of the day, there isn't an enormous amount that we can do about the external situation right now. We're at a time of crisis, and I don't need to go into how challenging things are for so many people at differing levels, from the incredibly bad, absolutely tragic, all the way to it's kind of inconvenient. Yeah, but this is going to be a challenging crisis for years to come, I would think. Yeah, not necessarily the health crisis, although that sounds like it may well be too, but definitely the economic implications. In that situation, if you're being held back by the way it was before, i.e. the way it isn't now, how is that going to help you? If you are unwilling to look for anything, if you are allowing something in your past that was bad to meet, like if you're taking from that experience that you can't do anything in the future, how is that helping you? If you are being pessimistic and you believe that there is nothing you can do because we are just like on a freight train moving towards a terrible future, how is that going to help you? However, if you believe that in any situation there are opportunities to create a better future than the one that we don't control right now, then surely that makes the most sense. I'm not saying that optimism is expecting a better future all round. This is the difference. The distinction is what I'm calling optimism is playing the cards you're dealt and thinking, okay, so there's a problem here. How can that hold the seeds of the solution? So how you develop and maintain your optimistic mindset, and when I say optimistic, remember my definition. Yeah, it's not expecting a better future, it's creating a better future. Yeah. So how you develop that optimistic mindset is probably exactly the opposite of what you might expect. Because the first thing you must do is actually look at the worst case scenario. Expose the thing you are most afraid of. So what is the actual fear that is the thing that you are most worried about, or the things that you are most worried about? Look them in the face. Yeah? Name them. Then what you do, once you've named them, okay, so I'm worried that I will, these gigs will go away and then everyone will forget about me. And so I won't, and I'll lose all the relationships. So I won't get any gigs when live music comes back, which it will, by the way. That's the thing I'm most afraid of. Let's just take that as an example. Okay. So once you've named the fear, the next thing you do is you tame the fear. Okay. What can I do to either reduce or remove the possibility that happens? That fear that I've named happens. So, for instance, okay, so how can I make it so that people don't forget about me? How can I maintain the relationships with the promoters or the agents or whoever I need to talk to? How can I be of service to these people at times of crisis? How can I show up and be there for them so that not only do am I not forgotten, but I'm actually more valuable on the other side of this. So there you have tamed just by writing that simple sentence down, you've named the fear and you've tamed the fear. Yeah? This is exactly the opposite of thinking of rainbows and unicorns, what most people, I think of as optimism. Yeah. So then the final step is you reclaim the fear. And what I mean by reclaim the fear is that you say to yourself, okay, now I know what to do to try and reduce or remove the possibility that the thing I'm scared of will happen. Now let's do the really challenging job and say, what would I do if this does actually happen? So let's just say that you do lose all the contacts and all the gigs. You don't have any gigs at all. And by the way, this example I just came up with off the top of my head. So I'm just kind of making this up, right? So what would I do if I lost? What would I do then? Well, probably what I would do then is I would have built up. I would have other income streams. So maybe I would have a different thing other than just live gigs that I could do, that I could get income from. I'm not just talking about a day job. I'm talking about, you have fans, you have people that know you, you've been doing gigs, you've been in front of people. Yes, being in front of people face to face in a room with them has been your preferred way of doing it, but that's not the only way to be in front of people anymore. I mean, we're kind of in front of each other right now, aren't we? It's not quite the same thing, but it does have benefits to it, right? So what would I do if that fear did come to pass? In this way, you're actually, when I say reclaiming your fear, you're reclaiming and I'm sorry to get a bit coachy woo on you here, but you're reclaiming your power from the fear, right? So, and when you do this exercise, what you've essentially got is some ideas for some things to try to avoid the fear happening, and also a plan of action. Yeah, it might be a very simple plan, but a plan of action to actually, even if it happens, decide what you're going to do. What does that, once you've got those things, and you can do this with all of the things that you're afraid of. Yeah, it was what I did in the workshop exercise this morning with the people. So when you've got all of those things, when you've tamed each of these fears and you've reclaimed them, what does that allow you to do? It allows you to be optimistic. And in fact, when you do an exercise like this, what it can actually do is show you opportunities that never would have been there, or you never would have thought of, or that never would have been present without the crisis. I did this exercise myself, and I'm now working on a couple of projects which I know for a fact never would have got off the ground. I never would have done them. I maybe had the idea about them, but I never would have done them had it not been for this crisis. And what I want for myself, and what I would love for you, and what I'm going to do my absolute utmost to help you do through this crisis, is for you to be able to, at some point in the future, when we're all through this, and we will get through this, at some point in the future, to be able to look back on and say, my goodness, that was terrible, that was awful, that was a cataclysm, that was a tragedy. However, in a sense, I am glad that it happened, because without it, this, and this wouldn't have happened. Times like this are when we have an opportunity to grow, because we're at the greatest point of resistance. We're pulling the most weight. And the only way that you can grow in a situation like this, that I've figured out anyway, is to be optimistic. But the only way you can be optimistic is by looking at reality in your face, naming your fear, taming your fear, reclaiming your fear. Then protecting the downside. What will I do if this happens? Which gives you actions to take, which then breeds more optimism. So I hope you found this valuable. It was a little kind of model that I came up with for thinking about this, and it's definitely what I am doing through the crisis. If you want the exercise, the workshop, the recording of the workshop that I did with my email subscribers this morning, the one where it was full and I accidentally, some people couldn't join, then please send me an email to mike@makemusicyourlife.com. I will send it to you at no worries at all. And until tomorrow, this time, where we'll be making some music and having a bit of fun, and I'll be showing you how I work on one of my splurges. This time one which is less finished, because the last time it was more finished. Then come and join me. It's half an hour before now tomorrow. But until then, stay safe, stay healthy, stay sanitized, and onwards and upwards.